My name is Emily Mason, 32 years old, an officer in the United States Army. In my 10 years of service, I learned that discipline can conquer almost anything, except the kind of betrayal that comes from inside your own home. That night, in a cold barracks room at Fort Irwin, California at 3 a.m., the attack came via text message. It was from my husband, Darren. The photo he sent was a knife straight to the heart. Him and a platinum blonde woman beaming in front of our dream home in Austin, holding a sold sign, but it was the caption underneath that crushed my soul. Tiffany and I just used our savings to buy it. She's sweet, and she's here. She's everything you'll never be. My blood ran cold, but my hands didn't shake. They thought a soldier thousands of miles away was helpless. They were wrong. If you have ever sacrificed everything for someone only to be treated with contempt, let me know where you're listening from. Support me by giving me a like and hit subscribe, because this story is about turning pain into power and getting back every last cent of justice. 3 o'clock in the morning in the Mojave Desert has its own special kind of silence. It's a heavy quiet broken only by the low hum of the barracks ventilation and the distant rumble of an armored vehicle. The air in my room was stale, tasting of dust and institutional cleaning supplies. Sand, fine as powdered sugar, had worked its way into everything: my sheets, my uniform, the grooves of my laptop. After 14 hours of leading a platoon through a simulated village assault under the relentless California sun, my body was a single throbbing ache. Every muscle screamed for sleep. But for one precious hour from O300 to W400, the base's satellite network was opened for personal use. It was our only window to the world outside the razor wire of the National Training Center. For me, it was my only window to Darren. That hour was like a canteen of cool water after a day of forced marches. It was the one thing that made the isolation bearable. I sat on the edge of my paper-thin mattress, my phone in hand, waiting for the little green dot to appear next to his name. My heart held a familiar, warm anticipation. I pictured him back in our Austin apartment, probably watching sports center, a half-eaten bowl of cereal on the coffee table. I just wanted to see his words, to feel that connection. Across the 2000 m that separated us, my phone buzzed. A sharp electric jolt in the stillness. A smile touched my lips. It was him. The message loaded. First, the photo, then the text beneath it. The smile vanished. The air didn't just leave my lungs. It felt like it was violently sucked out, leaving a hollow, aching vacuum in my chest. The room went utterly silent. The hum of the vent, the distant rumble, it all disappeared. There was only a ringing in my ears and the glowing screen in my hand. I wasn't crying. My training had conditioned me to suppress emotional responses in high-stress situations. And this, I registered with a chilling clarity, was a high-stress situation. My brain, the part trained at West Point to assess threats, took over. I wasn't looking at a picture of my husband anymore. I was analyzing intelligence. Target 1, Darren Miller. His arm was draped possessively around the woman's shoulder. His smile wasn't just happy. It was smug, triumphant. It was the look of a man who believed he had won decisively. Target 2, Tiffany. Platinum blonde, a spray tan, and a tight, brightly colored dress that screamed for attention. Her head was tilted onto his shoulder, her expression one of pure victory. The location, the craftsman-style house on a tree-in street in South Austin. Our house, the one I had a Pinterest board for, filled with pictures of wide front porches and dark hardwood floors. The one we'd been saving my deployment pay for. The one he was supposed to put an offer on with me when I got back. Then I reread the text, letting each word detonate in the silence. She's sweet and she's here. She's everything you'll never be. It wasn't just an announcement of an affair. It was a character assassination. It was a direct assault using my service, my sacrifice as the weapon against me. The message was clear. My dedication was my failure. My honor was my weakness. My fingers, steady and precise, began to move. I didn't text back. I started scrolling up, re-examining past communications with this new terrible clarity. Every message was now suspect. There it was, a picture from 2 weeks ago. Darren at Franklin Barbecue, the famous Austin spot with lines that wrap around the block. He texted it with the caption, "Thinking of you, grabbing some brisket with the guys." At the time, it made me smile. Now, I zoomed in. In the reflection of the chrome napkin dispenser on the table, I could see it. A distorted but unmistakable sliver of a woman with bright blonde hair. A cold wave washed through me. This wasn't a sudden mistake, a moment of weakness. This was a campaign, a calculated, methodical deception. He had been living this double life while I was eating MREs in the dirt and writing him letters about how much I missed him. The humiliation was the point. He wasn't just cheating. He was gloating, secure in the knowledge that I was trapped here, a helpless spectator to the demolition of my own life. The memory hit me then, sharp and unwelcome. The last night I was home. Before leaving for this rotation, I was packing my duffel bag while Darren sulked on the couch. "It must be so easy for you," he'd said, his voice thick with resentment. "Just checking out, leaving me here to handle everything by myself." I remember the guilt that twisted in my gut. I'd apologized, promised it would all be worth it when we bought the house. Now I saw it for what it was, gaslighting. He wasn't handling anything. He was actively destroying everything we had built. He had weaponized my guilt, using my commitment to my country as a smoke screen for his own betrayal. The injustice of it was a physical weight settling deep in my bones. My gaze shifted back to the phone. The shock had passed. The pain was still there, a cold, heavy lump in my chest. But something else was rising to take its place. Rage. Not a hot screaming rage, but a cold, focused, disciplined fury. A soldier's fury. My training had taught me that in the face of an ambush, the first step is to establish fire superiority. You don't panic. You assess, you maneuver, and you retaliate. My personal life had just become a combat zone. But they made a critical error. They underestimated their enemy. I analyzed the situation. Financial assets compromised. Personal security breached. My objective was no longer just to get through this rotation. My new mission was damage control and counter-assault. My thumbs moved deliberately over the screen. I typed a short, simple reply. Each letter a cold, hard bullet. "Wow, you're brilliant." I hit send. It wasn't praise. It was a declaration of war. Then I began methodically documenting the evidence. I took screenshots of the photo, the text, the old messages, the incriminating reflection. I saved them to my phone, then uploaded them to a new encrypted folder in my cloud storage, naming it something innocuous. NTCSP's Standard Operating Procedures. I didn't sleep for the rest of that hour. The rage was a clean, efficient fuel, burning away the exhaustion. I sat on my seat in the dark, the faint light from my phone illuminating my face as I began to formulate a plan. They thought they had crippled me. They thought distance made me weak. They didn't understand. Distance just gives a soldier a better field of fire. As the first pale light of dawn broke over the Mojave Desert, illuminating the harsh, unforgiving landscape, I knew exactly where I had to go. How could I have been so blind? The question echoed in the sterile quiet of my barracks room, a relentless counterpoint to the fury that had kept me awake all night. As a soldier, my life depended on situational awareness. The ability to scan the horizon for threats, to recognize when something was out of place. I could spot a concealed IED from a moving vehicle, but I had failed to see the enemy sleeping in my own bed. The answer, I realized with a sickening lurch, was wrapped in the tinsel and warmth of a Christmas 2 years ago back home in Ohio. That memory had always been one of my favorites. The house smelled of pine needles and my mom's cinnamon rolls. Snow was falling in thick, silent flakes outside. My whole family was there and Darren, charming as ever, was holding court by the fireplace. He presented me with a small, elegantly wrapped box. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a single perfect pearl. It was beautiful, far more expensive than anything I'd expected. A little something for my bonus, he'd announced proudly to my parents. My freelance design business is really taking off. My mom had beamed. My dad had clapped him on the shoulder, and my heart had swelled with pride. I was so proud to be with a man who was ambitious, who was building something for us. I remember catching my older brother's eye. He's an electrician, a man who works with his hands and trusts only what he can see and touch. There was a flicker of skepticism in his gaze, but I dismissed it. Later that night, I overheard Darren talking to my cousins, using phrases like leveraging assets and scaling the brand. He condescendingly told my brother, "It's about a bigger mindset, you know, not just trading hours for dollars." At the time, I thought he sounded smart, driven. Now, I saw it for what it was, a performance. And I was his primary audience, applauding the man who was picking my pocket. Because as I sat there in the pre-dawn chill of the desert, scrolling through our joint bank account statements on my phone, the truth was laid bare. 2 days before Christmas, a charge for the exact price of that necklace from a high-end jewelry store. Paid for with my money, the warmth of that Christmas memory turned to ash. The deceit wasn't just about the money. It was about the calculated performance, the way he'd used my own funds to buy the admiration of my family. Another memory surfaced, this one warmer, closer to home in Austin. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon a few months before my deployment. We were on the porch of our rental, drinking Shiner Boch from long-necked bottles as the Texas sun dipped low. We had a stack of real estate magazines between us. I pointed to a picture of a 1920s craftsman-style house, its deep, welcoming porch framed by thick columns. "This is it," I'd sighed, tracing the roof line with my finger. "Someday I want to sit right there on that porch swing and watch our kids play." In the yard, Darren had pulled me close, his voice a warm murmur against my hair. "Your dream is my dream, Em." He hadn't been lying. It was his dream. He just cast a different leading lady. The realization was a deeper wound than the affair itself. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had methodically memorized the most sacred blueprint of my soul and used it to build a life for someone else. It was an act of profound spiritual theft. The financial lies were just the scaffolding for this grand betrayal. Every month, like clockwork, $2,000 from my military paycheck was direct deposited into our joint account. And every month, Darren had a story. "I'm investing in an online coding bootcamp, Em. It's going to triple my earning potential." Or I had to buy a new software suite for this big project. "You have to spend money to make money." He painted these vibrant pictures of a future where his investments would pay off, where he would be the visionary tech mogul and I could finally relax. He made me feel like the responsible, supportive partner to a misunderstood genius. The truth I now saw in the string of Venmo transactions and credit card charges was far uglier. The coding bootcamp was a weekend trip to New Orleans with Tiffany. The software suite was a pair of designer shoes I saw her wearing in one of her Instagram photos. Shoes I would never have dreamed of buying for myself. He wasn't building a future. He was funding a fantasy. All on my dime. And the worst part, the final damning piece of evidence. It had been staring me in the face for a month. I remembered the call vividly. I was in the field taking a 5-minute break. My face caked with grime. My phone buzzed with a fraud alert from our bank. My stomach tightened. It was our main savings account. I immediately called Darren. "Hey, what's going on?" "The bank just sent me a fraud alert." I heard him chuckle on the other end. A sound so relaxed, so reassuring. "Oh, that babe, don't worry about it. It's just a system glitch. I'll call them and get it sorted out. You just focus on what you're doing out there. Don't sweat the small stuff." His voice was so convincing, so full of confident dismissal that I believed him. I was tired, stressed, and overwhelmed. The Thought of dealing with bank bureaucracy from a tent in the middle of nowhere was exhausting. I was relieved to let him handle it. He knew I'd be relieved. He counted on it. He used my exhaustion, my devotion to my duty as a shield for his crimes. He turned my focus into his opportunity. That realization made my skin crawl. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had studied me, learned my pressure points, and used the very best parts of my character, my discipline, my trust, my sense of duty against me. I had aced my situational awareness courses at West Point. I was trained to detect threats in complex environments, but in the most important environment of all, my own home, my own heart. I had failed the test completely. But love isn't blind. We choose what we don't see. I had chosen to ignore the whispers of doubt, the quiet warnings from my father, a Vietnam vet, who once told me, "A man without purpose is the most dangerous man of all, kiddo." I had chosen to believe in the man I loved, and he had chosen to make me pay for it. Grief is a fog, but my training gave me a compass. My West Point instructor used to say, "A good officer doesn't know all the answers, but they know exactly who to ask." As the sun climbed over the brown peaks of the Tort Mountains, I wasn't just a betrayed wife anymore. I was an officer with a mission. At 800 hours sharp, I walked into the Judge Advocate General's court office. The building was like every other on post, functional, beige, and smelling faintly of stale coffee and industrial floor wax. Stacks of manila folders threatened to overflow from metal filing cabinets. A meticulously folded American flag stood in the corner, its colors a stark, solemn contrast to the drab surroundings. A sergeant at the front desk pointed me toward an office at the end of the hall. Behind the desk sat Captain Patricia Bear. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing and hair pulled back in a severe regulation bun. She didn't offer platitudes or sympathetic smiles. She just gestured to the chair. "Officer Mason, have a seat." I presented my case the way I would brief a commanding officer. Facts, timeline, evidence. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I laid out the sequence of events with cold, hard precision, from the initial text message to the fraudulent bank activity I'd uncovered. When I finished, I placed my phone on her desk. The screen opened to the picture of Darren and Tiffany. Captain Weber picked it up. Her face was an unreadable mask as she scrolled through the messages, her expression unchanging. But then she set the phone down, looked me directly in the eye, and gave a single decisive nod. The nod wasn't just an acknowledgement. It was a validation. It was the first time in 24 hours that someone had looked at my reality and confirmed it was real. "Officer Mason," she said, her voice calm and firm. "You did the right thing by coming here." Those 9 words were like a combat medic applying a pressure dressing to a bleeding wound. They didn't fix the damage, but they stopped the hemorrhaging in my soul. Captain Weber leaned forward, her focus absolute. "Your husband made a very common, very stupid mistake. He thinks he's dealing with a distant wife. He's not. He's dealing with the United States Army." She explained the Service Members Civil Relief Act, the SC, a piece of federal legislation I'd only vaguely known about. It was a legal shield forged specifically for situations like mine. This law protects you from financial ruin, illegal property seizure, and fraud while you are on active duty, she stated. He didn't just break your trust. He broke federal law. She picked up her phone. Her conversation was brief, efficient, and filled with acronyms I barely followed. But the effect was immediate. "See, we'll see you now," she said, hanging up. "Their office is 2 buildings down. I've already sent them your initial statement. 30 minutes. A massive institutional machine was now grinding into motion, and it was doing it for me. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt since the text arrived. Hope. The Criminal Investigation Division office was even more Spartan than the last. The man who met me there, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, was built like a fire hydrant, solid, tough, and immovable. He was a Latino man with Weathered skin and eyes that had seen every lie and excuse imaginable in his 20 years on the job. He didn't offer me coffee or condolences. He got straight to the point. "I've read Captain Weber's preliminary notes," he said, his voice a low gravel. "Let me tell you what I see. A weak man at home, jealous of his serving spouse. He feels small, so he does something big and stupid to feel powerful. They think they're smart." He leaned forward, locking his gaze with mine. "They're not smart, officer. They're just shameless. And we're very, very good at dealing with the shameless." His confidence was infectious. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone in a dark room. I had an army at my back. He introduced me to Specialist Jennifer Clark, a forensic accountant who looked young enough to be in college, but whose eyes held a sharp analytical intelligence. She immediately got to work with my permission, accessing my financial records on a secure network. The blueprint of Darren's betrayal unfurled across her monitor in neat, damning columns of figures. It was all there. The small probing withdrawals at the beginning, testing the waters, then the larger amounts. A $5,000 payment to an Austin car dealership. A series of charges from luxury resorts in Florida. It was a map of my stolen life. Jennifer's finger traced a line on the screen. "Look at this," she said, her voice sharp with discovery. "Here it is. The down payment on the house. $10,000 transferred from your joint savings account via a debit card transaction." She looked up at me. He wasn't even smart enough to use a wire transfer or a cashier's check to cover his tracks. He used a debit card. It's like leaving a signed confession at a crime scene. A disgusting bitter taste filled my mouth, but beneath it was that flicker of hope now growing into a small, steady flame. He was sloppy. He was arrogant. And that was going to be his downfall. The machine was in motion. The first pieces of evidence were secured, and for the first time, I could see a path through the wreckage. It was a long road, but it was a road that led to justice. If you believe that no one who serves their country should ever have to fight a battle like this alone, please support me by hitting that like button. And in the comments, just type the words, "We've got your six." Because for the first time in this whole nightmare, I finally feel like someone does. Jennifer Clark pointed at the screen again, her voice low. "He didn't just take the money, Captain. To get the loan approved this fast, he told the bank he had your power of attorney." Rodriguez looked at me, his eyes like flint. "And that, Officer Mason," he said grimly, "is where a simple fraud case becomes a federal conspiracy." Master Sergeant Rodriguez's words, "federal conspiracy," hung in the air long after our call ended. The case had metastasized. What started as a personal betrayal had quickly become something far more sinister. The next few hours were a cascade of increasingly horrifying revelations, each one peeling back another layer of the rot that had infested my life. The first blow came that afternoon. Rodriguez video called me from his office. "Officer Mason, I'm sending you a file. I need you to look at a signature." A PDF of a mortgage application appeared on my screen. I scrolled to the last page. There on the dotted line next to my printed name was a clumsy amateurish forgery of my signature. It was barely a passable imitation, the loops too wide, the slant all wrong. "Is this your signature, officer?" Rodriguez asked, his voice formal. "Official, no, Master Sergeant," I replied, my own voice as cold and hard as ice. "It is not." That was the moment. The second my denial was officially recorded, the case crossed an irrevocable line. This was no longer a messy divorce. It was bank fraud, wire fraud, a federal offense that carried serious prison time. Rodriguez explained that the CD team in Austin had already subpoenaed the bank's records. Darren had told the loan officer I was on a short training rotation and that he had been granted full power of attorney to sign on my behalf. A lie built upon a foundation of pure contempt. But Darren wasn't smart enough to come up with this on his own. That's when Jennifer Clark started digging into Tiffany Vance. The woman's Instagram profile was a digital shrine to materialism, and self-absorption. It was a curated collection of Gucci handbags, champagne brunches, and tropical vacations, all punctuated by vapid captions about living your best life and manifesting abundance. It was the kind of empty glamour that Darren, with his deep-seated insecurities, would have found irresistible. One post from 3 weeks prior made a wave of nausea roll through my stomach. It was a picture of a pair of long tan legs propped up on a sun lounger with the turquoise waters of the Atlantic in the background. The caption read, huge. Thank you to my secret benefactor for funding this lifestyle. Some girls work hard. Other girls work smart. The post was geotagged at a luxury resort in Miami, a resort whose bill I now knew had been paid for with my savings account. The sheer unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. She wasn't some naive girl caught up in an affair. She was a co-conspirator, a smug accomplice who was so proud of her scheme that she couldn't resist bragging about it to the world. She was mocking me openly and without fear. The proverb my grandmother used to quote echoed in my head. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. I had never understood its weight until that moment. But the worst was yet to come. The forged signature was bad. The Instagram post was worse. What Jennifer found next, however, was a violation on a completely different level. Officer Mason, Jennifer said over the phone later that evening, her voice tight with professional anger. We've run your social security number through the credit bureaus. You need to prepare yourself. She told me that in the last 2 months, using my personal information, my name, my date of birth, my flawless credit history, Darren and Tiffany had opened 3 new high-limit credit cards. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had stolen my name, my reputation, the good standing I had spent more than a decade building through fiscal responsibility, on-time payments, and disciplined living. The total outstanding balance was $78,000. The number just hung there in the air. $78,000 on what? Lavish dinners, designer clothes, airline tickets. They had been living like royalty on the strength of my good name. It was the most profound kind of invasion. They had taken my identity, the very essence of my credibility as a person and an officer, and used it as their personal slush fund. I felt stripped bare, as if the uniform I wore, the rank on my collar, meant nothing. It had all just been a tool for them, a resource to be plundered for their cheap thrills. That's when Rodriguez's suspicion crystallized into certainty. This operation was too sophisticated for a lazy wannabe entrepreneur like Darren. The speed, the multiple lines of attack. It had the hallmarks of a professional. He suspected Tiffany wasn't just a girlfriend. She was the architect. He ran a preliminary background check on Tiffany Vance. The results came back almost immediately. It turned out Tiffany Vance was just one of her preferred names. She also went by Candace Lee in Florida and Jessica Martin in Nevada. More importantly, she had active warrants for her arrest in both states for fraud and grand larceny. The pattern in each case was identical. Find a man with a successful, often absent partner and systematically drained their resources. She was a predator, a professional grifter, a black widow who lured in weak-willed men and used them as tools to get to the real prize. Darren wasn't her partner. He was her key. He was the bait she used to get to me. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, revealing a picture more ugly and pathetic than I could have imagined. Darren, with his fragile ego and resentment, was the perfect mark. Tiffany had likely fed his sense of victimhood, telling him he deserved more, that he was the real genius, that I was the one holding him back. She had given him the validation he craved. And, in return, he had handed her the keys to my entire life. I ended the call with Rodriguez and sat in the suffocating silence of my room. The initial shock had been a physical blow. This was different. This was a slow-acting poison spreading through every memory, tainting every good moment we'd ever shared. He hadn't just left me. He had conspired to destroy me. Your husband isn't the chess player, Rodriguez had told me just before hanging up, his voice a low growl. He's just a pawn and we're about to flip their whole board. The phone call from Master Sergeant Rodriguez came late the next day. His voice was low and steady, the calm at the center of an approaching storm. Everything is in place, he said. The final closing for the house is scheduled. The show starts tomorrow at 1000 hours Austin time. Would you like a front row seat, officer? A cold thrill, sharp and electric, shot through me. This was it. Absolutely, Master Sergeant, I replied. He laid out the operation with the precision of a mission brief. The closing was at a high-end title company in downtown Austin. The company and the bank were now fully cooperating with C. Undercover agents would be in the lobby posing as clients. The title agent herself would play a part. She's going to tell them there's a minor discrepancy with the power of attorney paperwork that needs to be cleared up. Rodriguez explained. We need to keep them there. We need them talking. We'll have the whole room wired for audio. The objective was simple. Let their own arrogance be the bait that springs the trap. That night, sleep was impossible. It wasn't fear that kept me awake, but a strange humming anticipation. It was the same feeling I got before a major field exercise. The quiet tension before the controlled chaos begins. I lay on my seat, staring at the ceiling, thinking of a line from Sunsis, The Art of War, a book practically issued with our uniforms. Know your enemy and know yourself, and you will not be imperiled in 100 battles. I knew Darren's weakness, his ego. And thanks to C, I now knew Tiffany's her greed. Just then, my phone lit up with a new message. It was Darren. The timing was so darkly perfect. It was almost comical. Big day tomorrow, signing the final papers on our new life. Wish you could be here to celebrate. But I guess you're busy saving the world, huh? The sneering condescension, the utter lack of awareness, it made my blood boil. He was so sure of his victory, so confident in my powerlessness. I took a steadying breath, my fingers hovering over the screen. I didn't reply. Instead, I screenshotted the message, attached it to an email, and sent it to Rodriguez. My subject line was 2 words, evidence of intent. The next morning at Oro 700 Pacific Time, the 0900 in Austin, I was in a small, secure communications room on base. Captain Weber sat with me, a silent, solid presence at my side. She'd brought 2 cups of black coffee from the mess hall. Rodriguez was on a secure conference line, his voice a low murmur in my earpiece. The operation was live. Surveillance team is in place, he reported. We have eyes on the lobby. It's 9:45. I close my eyes, picturing the scene. A sleek, modern office with glass walls and expensive leather chairs. A world away from the dust and grit of Fort Irwin. Targets are approaching the building. Rodriguez's voice crackled. A minute of silence stretched into an eternity. Okay, they're inside. Miller is in a cheap-looking suit, trying too hard. Vance looks like she's headed to Fashion Week. Smug doesn't even begin to cover it. I could see it perfectly. Darren puffed up with a sense of self-importance he'd never earned. Tiffany looking down her nose at everyone, already spending my money in her head. They were led into a conference room. Rodriguez's team had an agent at the next table pretending to review documents. His microphone was live. I could hear the faint muffled sounds of their conversation. Tiffany's high, sharp laugh. Darren's deeper tones. He's getting impatient, Rodriguez whispered. Just told her. The title agent better not be late. A pause. Wait. A minute. Got something good. The audio feed cleared slightly. I could just make out Darren's voice dripping with disdain. So naive and trusting. It was almost too easy. Captain Weber, listening in on a second earpiece, met my eyes. Her expression was granite. The minutes ticked by. 0955. 1. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now we just had to wait for them to chew on it. Then another text from Darren buzzed on my phone, which I had placed face up on the table. This one was different. The smugness was gone, replaced by a cloying, manipulative sweetness. Hey baby, you okay? Haven't Heard from you in a bit. Worried? Just wanted to say no matter what happens, I'll always love you. I stared at the message, a fresh wave of disgust washing over me. He was in the middle of stealing my life savings and my home, and he was sending this. It was so transparently slimy. He was building his alibi, creating a digital paper trail of concern in case something went wrong. He was trying to manipulate me even as the jaws of the trap were closing around him. Captain Weber leaned over and read the text. She didn't say anything. She just shook her head slowly, a look of profound contempt on her face. He's a cockroach, she said quietly. And I knew. She was right. It was time to turn on the lights. The title agent is going in, Rodriguez announced in my ear. It's showtime. I took a sip of the bitter black coffee. My hands were perfectly steady. My heart was a cold, hard drum, beating out a rhythm of methodical resolve. The waiting was over. The battle was about to be joined, and for the first time in my life, I was going to be the one giving the orders that would set the ambush. The title agent is going in, Rodriguez announced in my ear. It's showtime. In the communications room at Fort Irwin, I leaned forward. My entire world narrowed to the sound coming through my earpiece. I could hear the scrape of a chair, a polite clearing of a throat. Mr. Miller, a woman's calm, professional voice said, "We have a slight problem with the power of attorney document from your wife." Darren's voice, amplified by the hidden microphone, was instantly sharp and arrogant. A problem? What kind of problem? It's all perfectly legal. My wife is deployed. He was trying to steamroll her using his usual tactic of manufactured authority. I'm sure it is, the agent replied smoothly. But our legal department just needs to verify one small detail. It should only take a few more minutes. I could hear Tiffany let out an exaggerated, impatient sigh. Through Rodriguez's feed, he described her dismissively inspecting her nails, bored by the incompetence of the little people. That was the cue. Okay, we're moving in, Rodriguez's voice murmured low and steady. Back in the conference room in Austin, the pleasantries were over. Rodriguez and another plain-lawed C agent stood up from the adjacent table. Rodriguez let his jacket fall open slightly, revealing the badge clipped to his belt. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, Army Criminal Investigation Division, he said, his voice cutting through the room's quiet tension. The sound quality was crystal clear now. Mr. Miller, we need to have a conversation about the forgery of a signature belonging to an active duty service member. It's a federal crime. The change was instantaneous. I could hear a sharp intake of breath from Darren. The blustering arrogance in his voice evaporated, replaced by a high-pitched panic. Army what? What is this? There must be a mistake. My wife, she's completely on board with this. Is she? Rodriguez's tone was flat, devoid of emotion. Then perhaps you can show us the notarized power of attorney document authorizing you to sign a federal mortgage application on her behalf. Dead silence. Darren was speechless. Tiffany had stopped fussing with her nails. I could picture the color draining from Darren's face, the gears in his mind grinding to a halt as he realized the walls were closing in. He must have turned to Tiffany, looking for a lifeline for his brilliant partner in crime to save him. But the rats were already abandoning the sinking ship. Rodriguez later told me that the look she gave him was pure ice. There was no support in her eyes, only cold reptilian calculation as she began to distance herself from the fool who had led them into this. Rodriguez didn't give them a moment to recover. On his signal, 2 more agents entered the room along with a uniformed officer from the Austin Police Department. One of the agents held up a tablet. Mr. Miller, we have an audio recording of you from approximately 10 minutes ago. In this room, referring to your wife as so naive and trusting it was almost too easy, Rodriguez stated, his voice methodical. The words Darren had spoken so smugly just moments before were now being read back to him like a death sentence. We have digital evidence that you and Ms. Advance here, he continued, nodding toward Tiffany. Have opened 3 credit cards using Officer Mason's social security number and personal information, racking up over $78,000 in debt. Tiffany made a small strangled sound. And the best part, Rodriguez paused for effect, letting the weight of his next words land with maximum impact. We have the security footage from the bank where you filed the initial loan paperwork. It clearly shows Ms. Vance signing the documents as a witness, attesting that she knew the signatory, my client, Officer Mason, personally. Which is interesting since the two of you have never met. The trap hadn't just been sprung. It had been methodically, perfectly, and completely sealed. Every escape route was cut off. Every lie had been exposed. That's when the chaos started. As the Austin PD officer stepped forward with the handcuffs, Darren's mind finally snapped. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking. A second later, my own phone buzzed on the table in front of me. Captain Weber, and I looked down at the screen. It was a final, desperate message from Darren. A pathetic eruption of cowardice. In all caps, it read, "What did you do? This is your fault." I looked at the words, the last venomous strike from a cornered snake. I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just a profound, quiet sense of release. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. In that moment, I could feel the universe bending. Captain Weber watched me, waiting for a reaction. I didn't give her one. Instead, I smiled. A small, cold, liberated smile. Without a word, I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Rodriguez. In my earpiece, I heard his phone buzz. A moment of silence, and then his voice laced with grim satisfaction. He looked at Darren, who was now being cuffed. Well, look at that. Add witness tampering to the list of federal charges. He gestured to the phone. You truly are the gift that keeps on giving. The click of the handcuffs snapping shut around Darren's wrists was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. That's when Tiffany finally broke. Her mask of cool detachment, shattering into ugly gulping sobs. But no one was paying her any attention. The show was over. If you've ever felt the satisfaction of seeing someone get exactly what they deserve, hit that like button for me. And if you believe in the power of karma, just type "justice is served" in the comments below. Let's celebrate this moment together. The curtain had fallen. The villains were in chains. And thousands of miles away in a dusty room in the middle of the desert, I finally took a deep breath and let it all go. For a few hours after the arrests, a profound sense of quiet settled over me. The storm had passed. The enemy was captured. And the immediate threat was neutralized. I thought naively that the story was over. I thought the worst part was behind me. I was wrong. My chapter, it turned out, was just the beginning of a much darker book. The call came from Specialist Jennifer Clark late that evening. The initial adrenaline rush had faded, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I expected a routine update, a procedural follow-up, but the tone in her voice was different. It was strained, serious. "Officer Mason," she began. "We've executed the warrant for Tiffany Vance's electronics, her laptop, and phone." "What?" "We found it's much bigger than we thought." She explained that their cyber crimes unit had broken the encryption on a hidden file on Tiffany's laptop. It wasn't a diary or a collection of photos. It was a spreadsheet. A meticulously organized, terrifyingly detailed spreadsheet. "There are 12 names on this list," Officer Jennifer said, her voice grim. 12 men, and Darren Miller is only one of them. My blood went cold all over again. Jennifer continued laying out the chilling details. Next to each man's name were columns of data on his wife or girlfriend. Almost all of them were service women. The spreadsheet listed their rank, their unit, their deployment and training schedules, and in a column highlighted in red, their estimated savings account balance. It was a predator's ledger, a hunting log. Tiffany Vance was no mere opportunist. She was a systemic predator, and service women were her chosen prey. Her modus operandi was both simple and diabolical. She would hang out at bars and restaurants near major military bases. Fort Hood in Texas, Fort Bragg in North Carolina, Camp Pendleton in California. She was an expert at spotting her targets, men who radiated a particular blend of resentment and insecurity, men who felt overshadowed by their successful, uniformed partners. She would then work her magic, seducing them, inflating their fragile egos and whispering poisonous ideas in their ears. She'd convince them they were the real victims, entitled to a bigger piece of the pie. She'd tell them to take back what you deserve. She wasn't just the catalyst. She was the supplier. She provided the technical know-how, the untraceable email accounts, the scripts for how to talk to banks, all in exchange for a 50% cut of the profits. So far, Jennifer concluded, her voice heavy, we've confirmed that 3 of the other men on this list have already gone through with the scheme. Between their cases and yours, we're looking at a total theft of over $200,000. I sat on my seat. The phone pressed hard against my ear, completely stunned. This wasn't just about my stolen house, my shattered marriage. This was a criminal enterprise, preying on the vulnerabilities created by military service itself. Tiffany had exploited the very foundation of trust that military families are built on. The faith that the person at home is guarding the life you're fighting to protect. As I was trying to process this, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Captain Weber forwarding a message from Darren's newly appointed public defender. The tone was a complete reversal from the arrogant, sneering man who had texted me less than 12 hours before. The rage was gone, replaced by a desperate, pathetic plea. Emily, please, you have to help me. The message read. I was a victim in this too. Tiffany manipulated me. She got inside my head. You know I love you. I just made a terrible, terrible mistake. Please tell them I'll cooperate. Tell them I was coerced. A victim? The word was so absurd, so grotesquely self-serving that I almost laughed. Was he a victim when he was smirking in front of my dream house? Was he a victim when he was typing out that cruel, dismissive text mocking my service? He wasn't a victim. He was a willing, enthusiastic accomplice whose only regret was getting caught. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted a get-out-of-jail-free card. I forwarded the email to Captain Weber without comment. Her reply came back in less than a minute. 3 words. It's too late. But it was the thought of those other women that truly changed everything for me. 3 other women right now somewhere in the world. Maybe in a tent in Afghanistan, or on a ship in the Pacific, or even in a barracks room just like mine, who had either just had their lives detonated or were about to. They were my sisters in arms, and they didn't even know they were under attack. In the Army, our most sacred creed is that we never leave a fallen comrade. You fight for the soldier next to you. In that moment, my personal pain was eclipsed by a powerful, clarifying sense of purpose. This was no longer just my fight. It was ours. I called Master Sergeant Rodriguez back. I've just seen the information from Specialist Clark, I said, my voice clear and steady. And I've just read the message from my husband. He's a piece of work, Rodriguez grunted. He is, I agreed. Master Sergeant, I need you to know something. I will do whatever it takes. I'll testify. I'll provide any information you need. I want to help you get every single one of the men on that list. And I want to make sure Tiffany Vance is put away for so long that she never has the chance to do this to another soldier again. The mission had changed. I wasn't just fighting to get my money back anymore. I was fighting to reclaim the honor of every servicewoman who had ever been betrayed while she was busy defending her country. My rotation at Fort Irwin was nearing its end when the sentencing hearing was scheduled. I chose not to attend. My fight was over. The rest was up to the system I had put my faith in. Instead, Captain Patricia Weber went to the federal courthouse in Austin to witness it on my behalf. She called me the moment it was over. Her first words painted a vivid picture. Darren Miller just walked into the courtroom, she said, her voice crisp. And clear over the phone. He's in a bright orange jumpsuit. It's a stark contrast to the cheap suit I heard he was wearing last time. The image was jarring. The smug wannabe tycoon was gone, replaced by a common criminal, stripped of his pretensions and clad in the color of his disgrace. Patricia told me he still tried to carry himself with a defiant swagger as if the jumpsuit were a temporary inconvenience, a wrinkle in his otherwise brilliant career. That arrogance, she said, lasted until the assistant U.S. attorney began to speak. One by one, the prosecutor laid out the cold, irrefutable architecture of their crimes. He played the audio recording from the title company, Darren's voice echoing in the solemn courtroom as he called me naive and trusting. He displayed the bank statements, a stark testament to their greed. He projected the screenshots of Darren's smug, contemptuous text messages onto a large screen for the judge and jury to see. With each piece of evidence, Patricia described how Darren's composure crumbled. The swagger melted away, his shoulders slumped, and his face became a pale, sweaty mask of disbelief. He couldn't deny it. He couldn't spin it. The truth, in all its ugly detail, was being laid bare under the fluorescent lights of justice. The spectacle only got uglier when Tiffany's lawyer stood up to speak. Her defense strategy was simple: throw Darren under the bus. She painted a picture of Tiffany as a young, impressionable woman who was swept up by a manipulative older man. She claimed Darren was the mastermind, the one who had planned everything, the one who had led her client down a path of crime. It was like watching two snakes turn on each other in a cage, Patricia recounted, her voice dry. All the loyalty they had in their conspiracy vanished the second they faced real consequences. But the judge, a senior federal judge with a stern face and decades of experience, was not fooled by the pathetic theatrics. Before he delivered the sentences, he removed his glasses, looked down at Darren and Tiffany, and spoke. His voice, Patricia said, was not loud, but it filled the courtroom with an undeniable gravity. This is not a simple case of financial fraud, the judge began, his words slow and deliberate. What you have done is an attack on the very foundation of our military families. When a soldier, a sailor, an airman, or a Marine is serving this country in a faraway land, they must be able to do so with the absolute faith that their home run is secure. That is a sacred trust. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. You two weaponized that trust. You took the sacrifice of a soldier and twisted it into an opportunity for your own selfish greed. Your actions are an insult to every man and woman who wears the uniform of this country. I held my breath, listening from my barracks room 2,000 m away. For weeks I had carried the weight of Darren's insult, that my service was a weakness, that my absence was a flaw. And now here was a federal judge, a pillar of the system, declaring that my service was an honor and that they were the ones who had committed the ultimate disgrace. It was a vindication so profound it almost brought me to my knees. Patricia's voice returned, pulling me back to the present. He's about to deliver the sentence. She relayed the judgment clean and final. Darren Miller, for his role as a willing accomplice, was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. He was ordered to pay full restitution to me for the entire $93,000. The stolen savings and the fraudulent credit card debt combined. Tiffany Vance, identified as the mastermind with a prior criminal history, received a harsher sentence, 7 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. She was also ordered to pay her share of restitution to me, as well as the full amounts owed to the other victims her network had targeted. When I heard the verdict, I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I simply let out a long, slow breath. A breath it felt like I had been holding since that 3 a.m. text message first appeared on my screen. The weight I had been carrying, the rage, the humiliation, the fight, it just lifted. But Patricia had one last detail for me. A final grim piece of poetic justice. After the sentencing, I spoke with the prosecutor. She said, "He told me what Tiffany admitted during her interrogation. Her plan was never to build a life with Darren. He was just a means to an end." She explained that Tiffany's final move was to have been the cruelest. Once the house was securely in their names, she had a plan to set Darren up for a minor drug charge. With him in jail, she would have been able to claim full ownership of the property and all their shared assets. He was never her partner. He was her disposable tool. The irony was staggering. The man who betrayed me for another woman was always going to be betrayed by her in the end. He had been so blinded by his own greed and ego that he couldn't see he was just a pawn in a much more ruthless game. He had chosen to align himself with a predator, and in the end, she had been ready to devour him too. I hung up the phone and looked out my window at the vast empty expanse of the desert. The Declaration of Independence promises us the right to the pursuit of happiness. I realized then that sometimes before you can pursue happiness, you must first secure justice. And justice finally had been served. The weeks after the sentencing were quiet. The storm had passed, leaving behind a strange and unfamiliar calm. The daily calls with Captain Weber and Sergeant Rodriguez ceased. The constant flow of information, evidence, and strategy sessions dried up. The war was over. But now I had to learn how to live in the silence of the aftermath. It wasn't a simple victory parade. It was a slow, deliberate process of clearing the emotional wreckage. About a week later, a letter arrived in the mail call. It was forwarded from my home address. The envelope was standard federal prison issue, but the handwriting on the front was Darren's. Seeing that familiar looping script, which had once filled birthday cards and love notes, now on a piece of institutional mail, felt deeply foreign. It was a relic from a life that no longer existed. I held it for a long time, debating whether to open it. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened. But the soldier in me, the part that needs all available intelligence before making a decision, won out. I slid it open. The letter inside was 4 pages of handwritten self-serving cliches. He had found God. He had realized the error of his ways. Tiffany, he claimed, had cast a spell on him, preying on his loneliness. He wrote about our high school days, about the love he swore he still felt for me. He begged for my forgiveness, and in the final delusional paragraph suggested that when he got out, we could start over and that this whole ordeal would make us stronger. Reading his words, I didn't feel the fire of rage or the sting of pity. I felt nothing, a profound and hollow emptiness. The man who wrote this letter was a stranger. He wasn't taking responsibility. He was auditioning for the role of the redeemed man, still trying to manipulate the narrative. The letter wasn't an apology. It was just another tactic. The most difficult task was still ahead of me, telling my parents. I finally made the call back home to Ohio, my stomach in knots. I laid out the whole story from the 3 a.m. text to the federal prison sentences. They were stunned into silence. After a long moment, my mother, a kind woman whose greatest fear is conflict and whose heart always defaults to forgiveness, spoke tentatively. "Oh, Emily, honey," she stammered. That's just terrible. But do you think you could ever, forgive him?" Before I could answer, my father's voice cut in firm and clear. "He's a Vietnam vet, a man who understands betrayal in a way my mother never will. That's between him and God," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "In a war, you have deserters. You don't trust them on the battlefield again, and you don't trust them in your life again. He chose his side, Emily. Now you choose yours." His words were a gift. They were permission. They were the validation I needed to hear from him, confirming that protecting myself wasn't selfish. It was a necessary act of survival. I never wrote back to Darren. Instead, I called Captain Weber. I asked her to have a formal message delivered to him through the prison system and his lawyer. The message was concise and absolute. "Officer Mason acknowledges receipt of your letter. She will not be responding. Any and all future contact must be directed through this legal office. The divorce has been filed. She wishes you time to reflect on your actions. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of self-preservation. I thought of something I'd read from the writer Nee Brown. Clear is kind. Unclear is unkind. For the first time, I was choosing to be kind to myself by drawing the clearest, most definitive boundary I could. I was building a wall not to trap myself in, but to protect the peaceful territory I had fought so hard to reclaim. That evening, back in my barracks room, I pulled a dusty shoebox out from under my bunk. It was filled with 15 years of my life with Darren. I sat on the floor and went through it one piece at a time. A photo of us at our high school prom. Me in a powder blue dress. Him with a goofy, charming grin. Ticket stubs from our first movie. Date, a terrible action movie we'd both loved. Dozens of handwritten letters he'd sent me during basic training, filled with promises of our future. I didn't cry. I looked at each item with a strange sense of detachment. I acknowledged that the love at one point had been real, or at least I had believed it was real. But the boy who wrote those letters and the man he became were two different people. Or perhaps the man he became was who he'd been all along, and I had just refused to see it. I picked up the box. I walked out of the barracks into the cool, clear desert night. The sky was a vast canopy of brilliant stars, indifferent and beautiful. I walked over to the large metal dumpster behind the building, and one by one I let go of the past. The photos, the letters, the ticket stubs. I dropped them all into the darkness. It wasn't an act of anger. It was a ceremony, a quiet, personal ritual of release. I was finally clearing the ground, making way for a future that would be built on a foundation of self-respect, not blind faith. The end of my rotation at Fort Irwin came on a blisteringly hot afternoon. The graduation ceremony was held on the same dusty parade ground where we'd begun our training months before. Dressed in my class A uniform, starched and immaculate, I stood at attention with my platoon. The heat was oppressive, but I felt a profound sense of clarity. This desert, which had once been the backdrop to my personal hell, now felt like a crucible. A place that had burned away everything that wasn't essential, leaving behind something stronger. When my name was called, I walked across the stage to receive my certificate. The commanding general, a man with a chest full of ribbons and a gaze that seemed to see right through you, shook my hand. He held it for a moment longer than necessary, his expression serious. "Officer Mason," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "We're proud of your resilience both on and off the training field." That quiet acknowledgement coming from a man I respected so deeply and spoken in front of my peers meant more than any court verdict. It was a restoration of my honor, not as a victim, but as what I had always been: a soldier, a leader, an officer in the United States Army. A few days later, my new orders came through. They weren't for Fort Hood near Austin. I had requested a transfer, a clean break from the ghosts of my past. My new duty station was Fort Carson, Colorado. I closed my eyes and could already picture it. A small apartment nestled near the mountains. Weekends spent hiking quiet trails, the crisp, clean air of a place untouched by betrayal. A true, fresh start. The restitution money, all $93,000 of it, had been wired into a new bank account that was in my name alone. I transferred a portion of it to my parents, making good on a promise I'd made to help them with their mortgage. The rest I put aside. It was no longer for a craftsman-style house in Austin. It was for a small plot of land somewhere with a view of the Rockies. I was going to build my own dream house on my own terms. This time, the foundation wouldn't be built on blind trust. It would be built on the bedrock of my own strength and self-respect. The week before I was scheduled to leave California, I got one last call from Captain Weber. "I thought you'd like to know," she began, a note of pride in her voice, "that your case has had an impact. Obviously your name and the specific details are confidential, but the modus operandi of the Vance network has become a case study for us." She explained that the JAG Corps was now using the anonymized details of my experience in legal training seminars across the country. They were teaching young service members about the specific vulnerabilities they face during deployment, how to recognize the red flags of financial exploitation, and what legal protections like the SC are available to them. Your painful experience, Emily, she said, using my first name for the first time, is now actively protecting thousands of other soldiers from going through the same thing. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. Darren and Tiffany's conspiracy was designed to destroy one soldier. In the end, it had inadvertently created an education that would protect an entire generation of them. That, I thought, was the sweetest revenge of all. My pain had been forged into a shield for others. On my last morning in California, my alarm went off before dawn. I didn't hit snooze. I dressed quickly, grabbed my car keys, and drove out to the edge of the desert, far from the lights of the base. I parked and got out, the air cool and sharp against my skin. In the pre-dawn stillness, the desert was a landscape of deep purples and soft grays. As the first rays of sunlight crested the distant mountains, they painted the horizon in strokes of orange and pink. The light spilled across the vast empty space, revealing a world of stark and quiet beauty. This place, which had once symbolized my isolation, now felt like a symbol of clarity, of a wide-open future. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean, cold air. I was no longer the woman who had collapsed in on herself in a barracks room at 3 a.m. I was no longer the wife who had sifted through the ashes of a 15-year love story. I had walked through fire and refused to be consumed. I was stronger. I was wiser. And for the first time in a very long time, I was completely and utterly free. The sun broke fully over the horizon, flooding the desert with a brilliant, uncompromising light. It illuminated a vast open road ahead of me. I didn't look back. I only looked forward. The war was over. And my life, once again, was just beginning. That sunrise over the desert wasn't just the end of my story. It was the start of a new chapter written on my own terms. No, I'm not the only one who has had to find their own dawn after a long, dark night. Remember that your value is never determined by those who try to tear you down, but by your own incredible resilience. If this story gave you strength, I would be honored if you would share one word in the comments that describes your own journey, like survivor, fighter, or hopeful. Thank you for listening. For more stories about turning pain into power, please hit like and subscribe to the channel. You are not alone.